Katie Martinez looked at the clock on the wall of Danny's diner for the third time in 5 minutes. It was only 7:30 in the evening, and she still had 3.5 hours left on her shift. Her feet were already aching from standing all day, and the smell of grease and coffee had become so familiar that she barely noticed it anymore. She wiped down the same table for the second time, making sure every spot was clean. The diner was quiet tonight. Only a few customers sat scattered around the restaurant, most of them regulars who came in at the same time every week. There was old Mr. Johnson in booth 3, reading his newspaper and sipping his black coffee. Mrs. Williams sat at the counter, picking at her apple pie and talking to herself like she always did. Katie had been working at Danny's diner for 3 years now. 3 long years of taking orders, serving food, cleaning tables, and dealing with difficult customers. When she first started the job, she thought it would just be temporary. She was 23 then, fresh out of her second year of college, and desperately needed money to pay her bills. Her plan had been simple: work at the diner for a few months, save some money, and then go back to school to finish her marketing degree. But life had other plans. Her car broke down and needed expensive repairs. Her rent went up. Her student loans required monthly payments that ate up most of her paycheck. Before she knew it, months turned into years, and she was still here, wearing the same pink uniform and serving the same food to the same people. At 26, Katie watched her old college friends through social media. They posted pictures from their office jobs, their business trips, their nice apartments, and their new cars. Sarah was working at a big advertising company in Los Angeles. Mike had gotten promoted to manager at his accounting firm. Lisa was traveling to different cities for her job at a tech company. Meanwhile, Katie was serving coffee and hamburgers, collecting tips that barely covered her basic expenses. On a good day, she might make $60 in tips. On a bad day, it was closer to 30. Her base pay was minimum wage, which meant she needed every dollar she could get just to survive. Her small apartment was nothing special. It had 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that was barely big enough for a couch and a television. The walls were thin, so she could hear her neighbors arguing or playing loud music at all hours. The heater barely worked in winter, and the air conditioner was broken most of the summer. But the apartment was all she could afford. Even with working double shifts at the diner, money was always tight. She had learned to shop for groceries carefully, buying only what was on sale and cooking simple meals at home. She had not bought new clothes in months, and her car was 15 years old and needed repairs she could not afford. The worst part was not the money problems, though. The worst part was feeling stuck. Every morning when Katie woke up, she felt like she was living the same day over and over again. Get up, put on the pink uniform, go to work, serve food, clean tables, go home, sleep, and do it all again the next day. She had dreams once. In college, she had studied marketing because she loved the idea of helping businesses connect with their customers. She was good at it too. Her professors often praised her projects, and she got excited thinking about working for a real company someday. She imagined herself in business meetings, creating advertising campaigns and solving problems for clients. But those dreams felt very far away now. Sometimes, late at night in her small apartment, Katie would look at job postings online. She would see marketing positions that required a college degree and experience she did not have. Even entry-level jobs wanted someone with at least a year of professional experience. How was she supposed to get experience if no one would hire her without it? Her manager at the diner, Tony Rodriguez, was not particularly understanding about her situation. Tony was in his 40s and had been managing restaurants for 20 years. He treated the job like it was the most important thing in the world, getting upset when someone was even 5 minutes late or forgot to refill the salt. Shakers. Tony usually gave Katie the worst shifts. She worked Friday and Saturday nights when the diner was busy and full of drunk customers who were rude and left small tips. She worked the early morning shift on Sundays when hardly anyone came in, and she stood around for hours making almost no money. When other employees called in sick, Tony always called Katie first to cover their shifts. The regular customers knew Katie by name, but most of them treated her like she was invisible. They would snap their fingers to get her attention, complain about their food even when nothing was wrong, and leave messes for her to clean up. Some of them were nice enough, but others acted like she was beneath them just because she was serving their food. Katie often wondered what would happen if she just quit. Would she be able to find another job? Would it be any better than this one? The thought scared her because at least at Danny's diner, she knew what to expect. The pay was terrible, and the work was hard, but it was steady. She could count on getting her paycheck every 2 weeks, even if it was not enough to do more than survive. Her parents lived in a different state and had their own financial problems. They could not help her even if she asked. Her few close friends from high school had either moved away or were dealing with their own struggles. Katie felt alone most of the time, like she was the only person in the world who could not figure out how to make her life better. On this particular Tuesday evening, as rain started to fall outside the diner windows, Katie felt especially tired. She had worked a double shift the day before and had only gotten 5 hours of sleep. Her back hurt from carrying heavy plates, and she had burned her hand on a hot coffee pot earlier in the day. She was thinking about all of this when the door to the diner opened and a man in an expensive-looking suit walked in. Katie straightened up and grabbed a menu, ready to seat him at whatever table he preferred. She had no idea that this customer would be different from all the others, and that the next few hours would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The man in the expensive suit looked around the nearly empty diner before choosing a corner booth near the window. Katie walked over with a menu and a glass of water, noticing that he seemed different from their usual customers. His clothes were clearly expensive, and he carried a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than Katie made in a month. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Katie asked, placing the menu and water on his table. The man looked up at her with tired eyes. "Just coffee, please. Black. And maybe I'll look at the menu in a few minutes." Katie nodded and went to get his coffee. When she returned, she noticed that he had pulled out a laptop and several papers from his briefcase. He was talking quietly on his phone, and even though she tried not to listen, she could hear bits of his conversation. "No, David, we can't push the meeting back again," he was saying. "Henderson Industries is expecting our presentation tomorrow morning at 9. If we don't get this contract, we're looking at layoffs by the end of the month." Katie set his coffee down and started to walk away, but she heard him continue talking. "I don't care if Lisa quit this morning. We need to fix this presentation tonight or we're finished. The graphics are all wrong. The data doesn't make sense, and frankly, the whole thing looks like it was put together by a high school student." The man hung up his phone and rubbed his temples like he had a headache. Katie went back to cleaning tables, but she kept glancing over at him. He was frantically typing on his laptop, then stopping to write notes on napkins. Every few minutes his phone would ring and he would have another stressed conversation with someone. After about an hour, Katie noticed that the man had barely touched his coffee. He had ordered a sandwich but had only taken a few bites. Instead, he was completely focused on his laptop screen, which she could see from across the room. It looked like some kind of business presentation with charts and graphs. Katie's curiosity got the better of her. During her college years, she had spent countless hours working on presentations for her marketing classes. She remembered how stressful it could be when something wasn't working right, especially when there was a deadline approaching. She walked over to refill his coffee cup. "Excuse me, sir. I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you okay? You seem really stressed." The man looked up at her with surprise. "Oh, I'm sorry. Am I being too loud with my phone calls? I can try to keep it down." No, that's not it at all," Katie said quickly. "I just noticed you've been working really hard on something, and you haven't eaten much of your food. I was wondering if everything was all right." The man sighed heavily. "To be honest, no. Everything is definitely not all right. I have the most important presentation of my career tomorrow morning, and it's a complete disaster. My assistant quit this morning without any notice, and she was the one who was supposed to finish putting everything together." Katie felt a wave of sympathy for him. "That sounds really stressful. What kind of presentation is it, if you don't mind me asking?" "It's for a potential client, a big manufacturing company called Henderson Industries. If we don't get this contract, my company might have to let people go. I've been working on this for months, but now that I'm looking at it, I can see that it's all wrong. Katie glanced at his laptop screen. Even from her angle, she could see that the presentation looked cluttered and confusing. The charts were hard to read, and there seemed to be too much information crammed onto each slide. "I know this might sound strange coming from a waitress," Katie said slowly, "but I actually studied marketing in college before I had to drop out. I spent a lot of time working on presentations like this. Would you mind if I took a quick look? Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes can help." The man stared at her for a long moment. Katie immediately felt embarrassed and started to back away. "I'm sorry. That was probably inappropriate of me to suggest. I should let you get back to your work." "Wait," the man said, holding up his hand. "You studied marketing?" Katie nodded. "For 2 years at Arizona State University. I had to leave because of money problems, but I was actually pretty good at it. My professors always said I had a natural understanding of how to communicate with customers." The man looked at his laptop screen, then back at Katie. "You know what? At this point, I'm desperate enough to try anything. My name is Richard Parker, and I'm the regional director at Phoenix Marketing Solutions. What's your name?" "Katie Martinez," she replied, feeling nervous but excited at the same time. "Well, Katie Martinez, if you really think you can help, I'd be grateful for any suggestions you might have." Katie pulled out the chair across from Richard and sat down. She turned his laptop toward her and started looking at the presentation. Within just a few minutes, she could see several problems. "Okay, so first thing I notice is that you have way too much information on each slide," she said, pointing at the screen. "People can't read all of this text while you're talking. They'll either listen to you or read the slide, but they can't do both." Richard leaned forward, interested in what she was saying. "And these charts," Katie continued, "they're really hard to understand. You've got too many colors and too many numbers. What's the main point you're trying to make with this data?" "That our marketing strategies increase sales by an average of 35% compared to our competitors," Richard said. "Okay, that's great, but it's buried in all these other statistics. You need to make that number the star of the show. Make it big, make it bold, and then use the other information to support it, not compete with it." For the next 15 minutes, Katie went through the presentation slide by slide. She suggested ways to simplify the language, reorganize the information, and make the visuals clearer. She pointed out places where Richard could tell stories instead of just listing facts, and she identified the strongest selling points that should be emphasized. Richard listened carefully to everything she said, taking notes and asking questions. The more they talked, the more excited Katie became. This was exactly the kind of work she had dreamed of doing when she was in college. She felt alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Katie, this is incredible," Richard said finally. "You've identified problems that my team and I completely missed. Your suggestions are better than anything we came up with in 3 days of meetings." Katie felt a rush of pride and accomplishment. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was using her brain for something important instead of just carrying plates and pouring coffee. "I'm glad I could help," she said. "Sometimes when you're too close to something, it's hard to see what's not working." Richard closed his laptop and looked at Katie with a serious expression. "Can I ask you something? What are you doing working as a waitress when you clearly have talent for marketing?" Katie felt her cheeks get warm with embarrassment. "Like I said, I had to drop out of college because of money problems. I've been trying to save up to go back and finish my degree, but it's been really hard." Richard was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card. "Katie, I want you to have this," he said, handing her the card. "What you just did for me tonight was extraordinary. I've been in this business for 20 years, and I rarely see someone with your natural instincts for marketing." Katie took the card with shaking hands. It was thick and expensive feeling with Richard's name and title printed in gold letters. "I have an opening at my company for a junior marketing coordinator," Richard continued. "The starting salary is $45,000 a year, plus full benefits. Would you be interested in interviewing for the position?" Katie stared at him in shock, unable to believe what she was hearing. $45,000 was more than twice what she made at the diner. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I know this is sudden," Richard said, "but I need someone with fresh ideas and the ability to see problems that others miss. You've shown me tonight that you have both of those qualities. Finally, Katie found her voice. Are you serious? You would really consider hiring me? I'm not just considering it, Richard said with a smile. I'm offering it to you. That is, if you're interested. Katie felt tears starting to form in her eyes. After 3 years of feeling stuck and hopeless, someone was offering her a chance at the life she had always wanted. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I'm very interested. Katie stared at Richard's business card long after he had left the diner that night. The gold letters seemed to shine under the fluorescent lights, and she kept reading his name and title over and over again. Regional Director, Phoenix Marketing Solutions. She had never held a business card that felt so important. The rest of her shift passed by like a dream. She served the remaining customers, cleaned the tables, and counted her tips, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Every few minutes, she would touch the business card in her apron pocket to make sure it was still there. She was afraid that, if she stopped thinking about it, the whole conversation might disappear like it had never happened. When her shift ended at 11 o'clock, Katie drove home in her old car with the radio turned up loud. For the first time in months, she felt excited about the future instead of worried about it. She kept thinking about what Richard had said. $45,000 a year. That was more money than she had ever imagined making. In her small apartment, Katie sat on her couch and looked at the business card again. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the smooth texture of the expensive paper. Part of her wondered if the whole thing had been real. Maybe Richard had just been being polite when he offered her the job. Maybe he would change his mind when he thought about it more. But another part of her, a part that had been quiet for a long time, was telling her that this was her chance. This was what she had been waiting for during all those long shifts at the diner. This was her opportunity to finally use her education and her natural abilities for something meaningful. Katie barely slept that night. She kept thinking about what it would be like to work in an office, to wear professional clothes, to have business meetings and work on real marketing campaigns. She imagined herself sitting in a conference room, presenting ideas to clients, solving problems that actually mattered. The next morning, Katie woke up early and called the diner to tell Tony that she would be a few hours late for her shift. She had never called in late before, and Tony was not happy about it, but Katie didn't care. She had more important things to worry about now. She spent the morning getting ready for what she hoped would be the most important phone call of her life. She practiced what she would say to Richard, trying to sound professional and confident. She looked through her closet for something appropriate to wear if he wanted to meet with her in person. At exactly 10 o'clock, Katie dialed the number on Richard's business card. Her hands were shaking as she listened to the phone ring. Phoenix Marketing Solutions, this is Lisa. How can I help you? Katie's heart jumped. Hi, I'm looking for Richard Parker. My name is Katie Martinez. He gave me his card last night and asked me to call. Oh yes, Mr. Parker told me you might be calling. He's in a client meeting right now, but he asked me to schedule an interview with you as soon as possible. Are you available this afternoon at 2 o'clock? Katie could hardly believe what she was hearing. Yes, absolutely. I can be there at 2. Lisa gave her the address and directions to the office. After hanging up, Katie sat in her kitchen chair, staring at the phone. It was really happening. She had an interview at a real marketing company in just 4 hours. Katie spent the rest of the morning preparing. She ironed her best dress, the one she usually saved for special occasions. She printed out her resume, even though it was mostly blank except for her college coursework and her job at the diner. She researched Phoenix Marketing Solutions online, learning about their clients and their services. The more she read about the company, the more nervous and excited she became. They worked with big businesses all over Arizona, helping them with advertising, social media, and marketing strategy. It was exactly the kind of work she had dreamed about doing when she was in college. At 1:30, Katie drove to the Phoenix Marketing Solutions office building. It was downtown, in a tall glass building that looked very modern and professional. Katie had driven past buildings like this many times, but she had never imagined that she might actually work in one. The lobby was impressive. with marble floors and expensive-looking furniture. Katie felt out of place in her simple dress and old shoes, but she tried to walk confidently to the reception desk. "I'm here to see Richard Parker," she told the receptionist. "I have an interview at 2 o'clock. The receptionist smiled and asked her to take a seat. Katie sat in one of the leather chairs and looked around at the other people in the lobby. They all looked like they belonged there, with their business suits and confident expressions. Katie wondered if she would ever fit into a place like this. At exactly 2 o'clock, Richard appeared in the lobby. He looked much more relaxed than he had the night before at the diner, and he was smiling when he saw Katie. "Katie, I'm so glad you could make it," he said, shaking her hand. "How are you feeling today?" "Nervous but excited," Katie answered honestly. Richard laughed. "That's exactly how you should feel. Come on, let me show you around the office." Katie followed Richard through the halls of Phoenix Marketing Solutions. The office was everything she had imagined and more. There were conference rooms with glass walls, workstations with multiple computer monitors, and walls covered with marketing campaigns and client presentations. Everyone looked busy and important. "This is where our marketing coordinators work," Richard said, showing her a section of the office with several desks. "If you join our team, this is where you would be sitting." Katie tried to imagine herself working at one of these desks, creating presentations and working on client projects. It seemed almost too good to be true. Richard introduced her to several other employees, including Steve Johnson, who was the senior marketing manager, and Maria Rodriguez, who was the creative director. They both seemed friendly, though Katie could tell they were curious about her background. Finally, Richard led her to a conference room where they sat down for the actual interview. Katie had expected him to ask her difficult questions about marketing theory or business strategy, but instead he wanted to know about her experience at the diner. "Tell me about a time when you had to solve a problem under pressure," Richard said. Katie thought for a moment, then told him about a busy Saturday night when the kitchen had broken down and she had to keep dozens of angry customers happy while the cooks tried to fix the equipment. She explained how she had offered free desserts and coffee refills, and how she had kept everyone informed about what was happening so they wouldn't get more frustrated. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need," Richard said. "Marketing is all about managing people's expectations and finding creative solutions when things don't go according to plan." The interview lasted for about an hour. Richard asked her about her college coursework, her ideas about marketing, and her long-term career goals. Katie found herself relaxing as they talked. This felt natural to her in a way that serving food never had. Near the end of the interview, Richard leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Katie, I have to be honest with you. When I first offered you this job last night, I was mostly acting on instinct. But after talking with you today, I'm convinced that my instincts were right." Katie held her breath, waiting for what he would say next. "I'd like to offer you the position of junior marketing coordinator, starting at $45,000 per year with full health benefits, 2 weeks paid vacation, and opportunities for advancement. We also have an education assistance program that would help you finish your college degree if you're interested." Katie felt like she might cry from happiness. "Really? You're really offering me the job?" "I really am," Richard said. "What do you say?" Katie didn't hesitate. "Yes, absolutely, yes. When can I start?" "How about Monday morning? That gives you the weekend to give notice at the diner and get ready for your new career." As Katie walked back to her car after the interview, she felt like she was floating. In just 24 hours, her entire life had changed. Yesterday, she had been a waitress with no hope of escape from her situation. Today, she was a marketing professional with a real future ahead of her. She sat in her car for a few minutes before driving home, looking up at the tall office building where she would be working on Monday morning. Katie Martinez, Junior Marketing Coordinator. She liked the sound of that very much. Katie's first day at Phoenix Marketing Solutions was nothing like she had expected. She arrived at the office building at 8:30 in the morning, wearing her best outfit and carrying a new notebook she had bought over the weekend. Her stomach was full of butterflies, and she kept checking her reflection in the elevator mirror to make sure she looked professional. The receptionist directed her to Richard's office, where he was waiting with a cup of coffee and a warm smile. "Good morning. Katie, ready for your first day?" I think so, Katie said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Richard handed her a folder with her name printed on it. Inside were her employee handbook, benefits information, and a schedule for her first week of training. Don't worry. If you feel overwhelmed at first, he said. Everyone does when they start here. The important thing is to ask questions and learn as much as you can. He led her to her new desk, which was in the marketing coordinator section of the office. It had a computer, a phone, and a small plant that someone had left there as a welcome gift. Katie sat down in the chair and tried to imagine herself working there every day. It still felt like a dream. Your first assignment is to work with Maria Rodriguez on a project for one of our smaller clients, Richard explained. It's a local restaurant chain that wants to increase their social media presence. Maria will show you how we approach these kinds of projects. Katie spent the morning with Maria, learning about the company's process for developing marketing campaigns. Maria was patient and encouraging, explaining everything step by step. Katie took notes on everything, afraid that she might forget something important. The key to good marketing is understanding who your customer really is, Maria explained, as they looked at the restaurant client's information. You can't sell to everyone, so you need to figure out who is most likely to buy your product and focus on them. This made perfect sense to Katie. At the diner, she had learned to read customers quickly, figuring out who wanted to chat and who wanted to be left alone, who was in a hurry, and who had time to relax. Marketing seemed to require the same kind of people skills, just on a larger scale. By lunchtime, Katie was starting to feel more comfortable. She ate her sandwich in the office break room with some of the other employees, who were friendly and welcoming. They asked her about her background, and when she mentioned working at Danny's Diner, several of them said they had eaten there before. I bet you learned a lot about customer service at that job, said Jennifer Walsh, one of the senior marketing specialists. That experience will actually be really valuable here. A lot of people in marketing have never worked directly with customers before. In the afternoon, Katie attended her first client meeting. It was with the restaurant chain that she and Maria were working on. The client, a woman named Carol Peterson who owned 5 restaurants in the Phoenix area, came to the office to discuss her marketing goals. Katie mostly listened during the meeting, but when Carol mentioned that she was having trouble attracting younger customers, Katie found herself speaking up. Have you considered what time of day you're posting on social media? Katie asked. When I was working in food service, I noticed that younger customers check their phones at different times than older customers. They're usually on Instagram and TikTok late at night, but they check Facebook more during their lunch breaks. Carol looked interested. I hadn't thought about timing. We usually just post whenever we remember to do it. Maria nodded approvingly at Katie's suggestion. That's a great point. We can develop a posting schedule that targets different age groups at the times when they're most likely to be online. After the meeting, Maria pulled Katie aside. That was excellent input, she said. You're thinking like a marketer already. Most people focus on what to post, but you're thinking about when and why. That's advanced thinking. Katie felt a surge of pride. For the first time since starting the job, she felt like she actually belonged there. Over the next few weeks, Katie threw herself into learning everything she could about marketing. She read industry blogs during her lunch breaks, watched online tutorials in the evenings, and asked questions constantly. Her coworkers were patient with her curiosity, and several of them offered to mentor her. Steve Johnson, the senior marketing manager, gave her a book about consumer psychology. This will help you understand why people make the buying decisions they do, he said. It's one of the most important things you can learn in this business. Katie read the book in 3 days, taking notes and thinking about how the concepts applied to the client she was working on. She started to see patterns everywhere, in the way people shopped, in the advertisements she saw on TV, in the way businesses tried to attract customers. Her work on the restaurant project was going well. Katie and Maria had developed a social media strategy that included different types of posts for different times of day and different platforms. They created content that appealed to families during dinner hours, young professionals during lunchtime, and late-night customers who were looking for delivery options. When they presented their strategy to Carol Peterson, she was impressed. "This is much more detailed than what our previous marketing company gave us," she said. "You've really thought about who my customers are and how to reach them." The campaign was successful almost immediately. Within 2 weeks of implementing Katie's posting schedule, Carol's restaurant saw a 20% increase in social media engagement and a 15% increase in orders from customers under 30. Richard was pleased with Katie's progress. "You're exceeding all of my expectations," he told her during her 1-month review. "Your natural understanding of customer behavior is remarkable, and you're learning the technical aspects of marketing very quickly." But Katie's biggest test came when Richard assigned her to work on a project for Henderson Industries, the same client whose presentation had brought them together that night at the diner. The company was launching a new product line and needed a complete marketing strategy. Katie was nervous about working on such an important account, but she was also excited. This was her chance to prove that she could handle major clients and complex projects. She spent days researching Henderson Industries, learning about their history, their competition, and their target market. She interviewed employees at different levels of the company to understand their culture and their goals. She analyzed their previous marketing campaigns to see what had worked and what hadn't. When Katie presented her preliminary findings to the team, everyone was impressed. She had identified several opportunities that Henderson's previous marketing agency had missed, and she had suggestions for reaching new customer segments that could significantly increase their sales. "This is graduate-level market analysis," Steve Johnson told Richard after the presentation. "Katie has a natural talent for seeing the big picture and the small details at the same time." Richard smiled. "I knew she was special from the moment she helped me fix that presentation at the diner, but even I didn't expect her to develop this quickly." Katie was working longer hours now, but she didn't mind. For the first time in years, she was excited to get up in the morning. She loved the challenge of solving marketing problems, and she loved the feeling of helping businesses connect with their customers. Her personal life was changing too. She had been able to move to a better apartment in a nicer neighborhood. She bought new clothes that made her feel professional and confident. She even started taking evening classes to finish her marketing degree, using the company's education assistance program. Sometimes, when Katie was working late in the office, she would look out the window at the city lights and think about how different her life was now. Just a few months ago, she had been serving coffee and cleaning tables, feeling like she was stuck in a job with no future. Now she was creating marketing strategies for major companies and being recognized for her talent and hard work. The transformation had been so complete that sometimes Katie had to remind herself that it was real. She was no longer Katie the waitress. She was Katie Martinez, marketing professional, and she was just getting started. 6 months after starting at Phoenix Marketing Solutions, Katie was sitting in the same conference room where she had first interviewed with Richard, but this time she was leading the meeting. Around the table sat executives from Henderson Industries, including the company president Mark Williams and the vice president of sales, Nancy Davis. Katie was presenting the results of the marketing campaign she had designed for their new product line. The numbers on her presentation screen were impressive. Sales had increased by 42% in the first quarter, and customer awareness had doubled in their target market. "These results are outstanding," Mark Williams said, looking at the charts Katie had prepared. "Our previous marketing agency never achieved anything close to this level of success." Katie felt a familiar rush of excitement and pride. Even after 6 months, she still couldn't quite believe that this was her job. She was creating strategies that helped real companies grow their business, and people were paying attention to her ideas. "The key was understanding that your customers weren't just looking for a product," Katie explained. "They were looking for a solution to a specific problem. Once we focused our message on how your product solves that problem, instead of just listing its features, everything changed." After the Henderson Industries executives left, Richard pulled Katie aside. "I have some news for you," he said with a smile. "The company has decided to promote you to marketing specialist. It comes with a salary increase to $55,000 in your own office." Katie stared at him in shock. "Are you serious? It's only been 6 months." "Katie, in 6 months you've accomplished more than some people do in 2 years," Richard said. "The Henderson Industries campaign alone brought In over $2 million in new business for our company. You've earned this promotion. That evening, Katie called her parents to tell them about the promotion. Her mother cried when she heard the news, and her father kept saying how proud he was. They had watched her struggle for years, working at the diner and barely making ends meet. And now she was succeeding beyond anything they had imagined. Katie's new office was small, but it had a window that looked out over downtown Phoenix. She spent her first morning in the office arranging her desk and hanging up her college diploma, which she had finally completed using the company's education program. Seeing the diploma on her wall made everything feel even more real. Her success at Phoenix Marketing Solutions was beginning to attract attention from other companies. Katie received phone calls from recruiters offering her positions at larger firms in cities like Los Angeles and Denver. The offers were tempting, but Katie felt loyal to Richard and the company that had given her a chance when no one else would. More importantly, she was happy where she was. She loved her work, she respected her colleagues, and she felt like she was making a real difference for the clients she worked with. Moving to a bigger company might mean more money, but it wouldn't necessarily mean more satisfaction. One of Katie's favorite parts of her new role was mentoring other young employees who were just starting their careers. When Phoenix Marketing Solutions hired a new junior coordinator named Alex Chen, who had just graduated from college, Katie remembered how overwhelmed she had felt on her first day. The most important thing is to listen to your clients, Katie told Alex during one of their weekly mentoring sessions. Don't assume you know what they need. Ask questions and really pay attention to their answers. Sometimes the solution they think they want isn't actually what will help their business. Alex looked at Katie with admiration. How did you learn so much so quickly? Everyone here talks about how amazing you are, but you've only been here for 8 months. Katie smiled. I think it's because I spent 3 years working directly with customers at a restaurant. I learned to read people and understand what they really wanted, even when they couldn't express it clearly. That experience taught me more about human behavior than any textbook could. Katie's story was starting to spread beyond Phoenix Marketing Solutions. A local business magazine wrote an article about her rapid rise from waitress to marketing specialist, and she was invited to speak at Arizona State University about non-traditional career paths in marketing. Standing in front of a classroom full of college students, Katie felt nervous but excited. These students were where she had been just a few years ago, full of dreams but uncertain about how to achieve them. I want you to know that your career path doesn't have to be a straight line, she told the students. Sometimes the experiences that seem like setbacks are actually preparing you for opportunities you can't imagine yet. My time as a waitress taught me skills that made me better at marketing than I would have been if I'd gone straight from college to a corporate job. After her speech, several students came up to ask her questions about her career. One young woman named Lisa Rodriguez reminded Katie of herself at that age. I'm struggling to pay for school, and I'm thinking about taking a semester off to work, Lisa said. But I'm afraid that if I stop, I'll never come back and finish my degree. Katie gave Lisa her business card. Don't give up on your education, but don't be afraid of taking a different path to get there. If you do decide to take time off, make sure you're learning something valuable from whatever job you take. Every experience can teach you something if you pay attention. One of Katie's proudest moments came when Tony Rodriguez, her former manager at Danny's Diner, called her at work. The diner was struggling with competition from newer restaurants, and Tony wanted to hire Katie as a consultant to help develop a marketing strategy. Katie agreed to take on the project, partly because she wanted to help Tony, but mostly because it felt like a meaningful way to complete the circle of her journey. She spent several evenings at the diner, interviewing customers and observing how the restaurant operated. You look different, Tony said one evening as Katie was finishing her research. More confident, like you know exactly who you are now. Katie thought about his comment as she drove home that night. He was right. She did feel different. The nervous, uncertain young woman who had served coffee and worried about her future was gone. In her place was someone who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to take on new challenges. The marketing strategy Katie developed for Danny's Diner was successful. Within 3 months, the restaurant saw a 25% increase in customers and a 30% increase in revenue. Tony was so grateful that he insisted on featuring Katie's story on the diner's website, calling her an inspiration to everyone who had ever felt stuck in their circumstances. A year after that rainy Tuesday night when she had first approached Richard Parker's table, Katie was featured on the cover of Phoenix Business Weekly magazine. The headline read, "From Diner to Director, The Remarkable Rise of Katie Martinez." In the article, Katie reflected on her journey. "I learned that opportunities can come from anywhere, but you have to be brave enough to recognize them and act on them. If I hadn't been willing to speak up that night at the diner, my life would be completely different now." Richard Parker was quoted in the same article. "Hiring Katie was one of the best decisions I've ever made as a manager. She reminds all of us that talent and determination are more important than traditional credentials. She's changed our company culture for the better." As Katie sat in her office reading the magazine article, she thought about all the young people who might be in situations similar to where she had been. She hoped that her story would encourage them to believe in themselves and to be ready when their own opportunities appeared. Katie Martinez had learned that sometimes the boldest move you can make is simply offering to help someone else. That one moment of courage had not only changed her life, but had created a ripple effect that touched everyone around her. She was living proof that extraordinary things could happen to ordinary people who were willing to take extraordinary risks.